Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
No one has yet been able to explain how the UK will leave the customs union and avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland. So what happens if there is one?
I mean, what can I say? Brexit is an absolute disaster. Brexit and the Good Friday Agreement are mutually incompatible. It's as simple as that. And if I'm honest, I sense a real resentment amongst Irish people that Ireland potentially becomes the collateral damage in a power play within the Tories in London. So whatever way this plays out, Irish interests, and by that I mean the bread and butter interests as much as the political interests, demand that the entire island stay inside the customs union and within the single market. And it is alarming to hear a mantra coming from London, repeated again and again, that, you know, we're gone, we're off, we're out. It seems with absolutely no sense of the consequences of that.
Now, I'm delighted to be joined by the chair of the Brexit Select Committee in the Irish Parliament and a close ally of Ireland's Premier. Hello to Senator Niall Richmond. Now,
good morning. Thanks very much for having me on.
It's a great pleasure. If I could really start with the whole issue of the border, many people in this over on this side of the sea fear that Dublin is overhyping the risk to peace in Northern Ireland of what's going on with Brexit. You are engaging in alarmism, aren't you?
Absolutely not. We're working on scientific reports from both police forces on this island, on Garda Síochána and the PSNI, and indeed comments from the Chief Constable and the PSNI just this week reiterate the fact that, as we've been saying for months, that any border infrastructure, any customs infrastructure is a viable threat to the peace process, which is only 20 years old on this island. The Irish government is a co-guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement, an international treaty lodged with the United Nations, as are the British government. So we do have a responsibility to make sure that that case is known. It's not alarmism. We don't take it for granted, and we just get really, really tired of people trying to say we're fear-mongering. This is a clear and present danger to our peace process that needs to be tackled. It's the reason why the situation on the island of Ireland was a top 3 negotiation position for both the European and British sides in phase 1.
But why shouldn't there be a technological solution, putting chips in goods so that everybody knows where they come from and what the right tariff is and all the rest of it?
Well, we've looked at everything and we don't think there are any technological solutions that allow no border to remain on the island of Ireland. And ultimately, if those in the British government who say that there are solutions would actually be forthcoming and present some sort of solution, it might help. But we've seen no detail from the British government or the key people within the British government who are saying that there are these technological solutions. There's been committee visits, and the findings of our government and everyone else involved is there is no solutions that allow us to make sure that the position on the island of Ireland is that it's border free. We have to keep this island border free. It was agreed, I might add, by both the British and European negotiating teams in December to do that. So we don't really know why we're reopening this package to discuss it again.
Can I just, though, put to you what many people say, which is the economic costs to the Republic of there being greater friction in your trading relationship with the UK is so great that you will go to almost any lengths to keep us in the European single market and keep us in the customs union, despite the fact that the British people voted against that.
The British people voted for Brexit. We fully respect that. We're obviously disappointed the Irish government actively campaigned in the referendum within the Irish community on the island of Britain for a Remain. That's not a secret. But we do accept that. Ideally, the UK wouldn't be leaving. Ideally, the UK wouldn't be leaving either the customs union or the single market. But if they are going to do that, we need to see a tangible solution that allows relations to be as normal as possible. And that's in everyone's interest, both in terms of the economy and the peace process. And what we want to see is the closest possible customs arrangement between the UK and the EU as a whole post-Brexit. But in order to do that, we need to see some idea of detail from the British government that we first asked for back in July.
Is there a solution that doesn't mean the UK staying in the customs union, in your view?
Well, what our Taoiseach Leo Varadkar said in a speech in Queen's University in, I think it was August time, was that a new customs arrangement, customs union between the UK and the EU as a whole is an absolutely plausible solution. We see the situation that the EU has customs associations with both Turkey and...
What would it look like?
Well, if we look at the current arrangements that the EU has with both Turkey and Switzerland, there are bases that we could form that off, but obviously it would be much stronger and would reflect the fact that we've had 45 years of common membership of the European project. We want to make sure everything stays as close to the relationship as possible, and we really believe that is in the benefit of the entire United Kingdom as well as the European Union, and we're more than prepared to continue to negotiate in good faith, but reopening something that was agreed back in December is not doing that.
Lovely to talk to you. Hope to see you again before long. Now, I want to pick up on what many would say is, at the moment, you know, perhaps the most important unresolved issue in respect of Brexit, which is the threat to peace in Northern Ireland. And let's be clear, although I put to him that there are many here who accuse the Irish government of being alarmist, I talked to quite a lot of people actually on the border in Northern Ireland, and they are very anxious about a return of crime, of smuggling and indeed of terrorism.
But support in Northern Ireland for exclusively peaceful and democratic means for determining their future is rock solid. I don't think it's justified to say that suddenly we're going to return to the Troubles over this issue because of that, you know, very, very strong support for ensuring Northern Ireland's future is only determined by democracy and by consent. The solution, I think, is could be very similar to some of the proposals put forward by the government last summer in a paper which put forward a sensible plan for, you know, electronic checks remotely from the border in relation to large-scale exports, and a local exemption for small businesses and local trade, which is essentially local. It just happens to be going over a border.
And frankly, others have made this point to me, that there's been quite a lot of work done on the technological solutions, and certainly on the other side of the negotiating table, the EU27 currently do not believe there is a tech solution in that sense. But Alistair, I want to come on to you now. As extraordinary good luck would have it, you've just published, here it is, a novel called Saturday Bloody Saturday. Now it's about football. You've written it with your mate from Burnley, Paul Fletcher. But one of the things that struck me about the book is that it's set in the early 1970s, and actually a lot of it is about terrorism that actually, I was a teenager in the 70s. I remember how we were all terrified of being blown up, you know, wherever we were living in the UK.
And I wouldn't be as sanguine as Theresa that everything is as rock solid as she's saying. And I think Neil Richmond's making a very, very good point. The sort of horrible terrorism that was there, I'm not suggesting that's going to come back because of Brexit, but I'm saying that if we do get returned to any sort of hard border, then that, I think, is going to throw a very, very large spanner into the works. And what's happening, all that's happening right across this Brexit fiasco, is that reality is catching up with all the false claims that were made, including one from Theresa during the referendum. There is no reason why we have to change the border arrangements in the event of Brexit. We are going to have to change them. These negotiations are showing that we're going to have to change them. And that and this isn't, we keep talking about this as though it's the border with Ireland. It's the border with the European Union that we're leaving.
All sides want the border to stay as open and free flowing as possible.
Everybody does. So let's get to the, I suppose, the lightning rod, as it were, for the Tory party. So the Prime Minister gave a commitment at the end of last year that if we can't find a technological solution, she would accept close alignment between the rules and regulations of the whole of the UK and the rules and regulations of the EU to facilitate that open border. Now, the EU is saying that has to be turned into a legal binding commitment. Lots of your colleagues, Jacob Rees-Mogg and others, are deeply anxious about enshrining what they would see as, you know, the opposite of taking back control. What's your view?
Well, the December agreement had that as an option, which was an absolute last resort if all else failed. And as I've said, there is a perfectly sensible proposal on the table to use technological means to keep the border as open and free-flowing as possible.
Would you allow her to sign a legally binding commitment for that as a last option?
Well, I'm not in a position to allow the Prime Minister to... the Prime Minister will do what she wants. The December agreement is very clear that this is a last resort, and also I would say it's limited to those particular areas which are identified as being crucial for North-South cooperation. So it is not a blanket commitment to comply with all single market rules. It is a last resort. There are much better solutions, and I'm sure the Prime Minister will be able to bring back a deal which delivers those solutions.
I've been getting away with it